My name is Noah Geisel, 2013 ACTFL Language Teacher of the Year. Thank you. Title of my talk is Placemaking, Storytelling, and the Struggle for Human Relevance, which sounds like a really pretentious toy talk title. And I'm going to hopefully convince you by the end of it that while it may be pretentious, it's also a really important idea that we should all be thinking about and thinking about how to make a difference. And really for me, what it all starts with is a report that came out last year that said that 50% of all work will be redundant by 2025. Not jobs, mind you, but work. In 2025, that's, when our 7th graders are graduating, right? And so half of all work is going to be redundant, not just in our lifetimes, but in a really short amount of time. And so what's going to be threatening it? We hear a lot in the news today about outsourcing, but honestly, most of what's going to be making that work redundant is automation, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. So what does that mean? It means that if you think about IBM's Watson that you first heard about winning against the world chess champion over a decade ago, Watson is learning at the rate of entire encyclopedias every few seconds, and it's been over a decade. Watson has had several years since Watson won at Jeopardy. What's Watson doing now? Watson is making cookbooks. You can go to Chef Watson, type in what you have in your pantry, and it'll give you a recipe that's never been made that's good. There's also a little X-ray on the slide here. Watson is reading X-rays right now. Watson is threatening not just people who write recipes jobs, but actual radiologist jobs. Not just grocery store checkers, but referees, drivers. And so what does this mean? It means that we need to figure out what are the 50% of work that's not being threatened by outsourcing, automation, machine intelligence, and artificial intelligence. And I really think that that begins, especially for us as language teachers, with what a lot of people call placemaking and storytelling. One of my idols in the placemaking space is a gentleman named Brian Corrigan, and this is how he defined to me placemaking. At the end of the day, it's about people. It's about being more human and about connecting with one another. Brian Corrigan introduced me to the idea of placemaking through a project that he did in Denver, Colorado called Oh Heck Yeah, where he teamed up with some video game developers and projection mappers, and they made a human arcade on a street corner that really only served to be a giant monitor showing advertisements all day. And the only people passing it were people who were either going into that restaurant or parking in the parking garage around it. Through Oh Heck Yeah's human arcade, Brian and his collaborators turned that street corner into a destination where not hundreds, not thousands, but tens of thousands of people went every weekend for an entire summer in order to play, in order to do a video game in which your body was the remote control, and where you connected with a complete stranger, had a friendly competition, and then were encouraged to give them a high five. Placemaking is not new, though. Everybody recognize where this is? Do our Italian professors know where this is? This is in Venice, and this is a pretty famous spot in Venice. It's Marco Polo's home. And one of the things that I learned when I was there with my wife was that actually this is where they know Marco Polo's home was near. They don't actually know where it was, they just know it was on this square. And here's the deal, a lot of that square is actually not visible by the canal. And so at some point, by government decree, they decided that it was the house on the canal so that the tourists could see it, right? So this idea of placemaking, been around for hundreds of years. The Western Wall in Jerusalem. For all intents and purposes, it is a really old wall. And yet thousands of people make a pilgrimage to it. People cry. It is one of the most defended landmarks on planet Earth. People give other people messages and say, will you stick this message in the wall for me when you're there? People have life-changing moments there because we've turned it into a place. Here in the United States, we're really good at placemaking, right? In World War II, this was the world's largest flag. And so you would take a family vacation to see it. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, this was the world's deepest well. We are talking, like, let's just frame what we're talking about. We're talking about a really deep hole in the ground. But because somebody put a sign outside that said, world's deepest well, family road trips had to pull over, buy a postcard, drink some soda, take a picture, because we are here. We have arrived at the world's deepest well. This is the John Lennon wall in Prague. John Lennon had no connection to this wall, and yet tourists flock there by the thousands every day to take their pictures in front of the Lennon wall. There's someone who makes a very good living playing Beatles songs while tourists like us give money into his guitar case because we came to the Lennon wall. Placemaking. What are these people doing with their hands? Watson couldn't have thought of that, right? This is something we are better than the artificial intelligence that is taking a lot of our work. Watson could tell us why the tower is leaning, but not why we should keep it there and not tear it down and replace it and fix it, right? This is one of the greatest landmarks in Italy. It generates tons of income for not just the nation, but the vendors, the shopkeepers, the tour guides, because we want to go and get our picture doing this. So where will you go in a world that increasingly is programmed to spare us interactions with one another? If you didn't see the big new announcement from Google, they now have earbuds called the Google Pixelbuds that offer real-time translation. So as I'm speaking in English, someone else wearing these earbuds can be hearing me in Chinese, in French, in Spanish, accurately, in real time. As language teachers, though, we know there's a huge difference between translation and being translators. It's capturing words. It's not capturing human elements yet. That is a place where we have a huge advantage. If you're not familiar with this, this is Real Today, Amazon Go. My slides will link to a real video showing this, but they have a store where you can walk in, grab what you want, and walk out. Never mind not taking out your earbuds, you don't even have to interact with a single person. It automatically bills your credit card through an app on your phone. Computer vision knew what you were picking up, what you put back, and how much you owe. My friend Daniel Eisman, who's an architect and a designer who's fluent in Spanish, English, Hebrew, and even Yiddish, shared with me this presentation. These are architectural renderings that his company spent tens of thousands of dollars to have rendered into nice digital animation. He, on a plane ride with his free iMovie app, turned it into a dramatic presentation and made the sale, and now is in charge of what's, when they break ground, will be the largest development in the Western Hemisphere. And it wasn't the tens of thousands of dollars of computer animation making these renderings. It was the free iMovie app that just made a 60-second video that was super mega mooey compelling, right? And created this emotional connection to the developers and his designs. And that's something that, again, artificial intelligence is not going to do better than us. One of the things that I am starting to think about this is a reframing of just the words, right? We look at nouns, and we have always been taught that it is either a person or a place or a thing. I think that part of our struggle for human relevance, part of where we help our students realize successful futures and jobs that do exist in 2025 and beyond, is by helping them see that the person and the place are inextricable from the things. It is all about people. I love this quote from a Denver entrepreneur named Justin Cucci. If you read this, you have no idea what his product is. His product is food. He's a restaurateur. But he doesn't view it as selling food. He took over an old mortuary where you can dine on the tables that used to roll coffins and, right? He took over an old peep show, like the filthiest building in Denver, and now it gets listed in magazines as the top brunch spot west of the Mississippi. He has a vegan restaurant where farm to table means that the herbs that you're eating were grown at your table. He's creating not a restaurant. He's not creating food. He's not creating dining. He's creating experiences. Another Denver entrepreneur is my friend Paul Laurie, who started something called the Silver Spork Social, where he does these pop-up dinners. The first one I went to, I got an email that said, "We all wear different hats in life, and so should you. See you at 6:30 p.m. in the magazine section of this local bookstore." We show up, we get whisked away to a private location, and he does these dinners like this. And for those of you who were at the keynote the other day, you heard our keynote speaker talk about hygge. He arranged a pop-up dinner around the theme of hygge. I can tell you I was there. I can tell you that we paid $120 a person to be there for 6 courses, paired with a cocktail pairing, paired with the violinist from a really famous band called the Flowbots, serenading us during dinner. And you know what? The next day, anybody who encountered me got to hear 20 to 30 minutes about my evening, and I didn't mention the food. What Paul is selling are experiences. The other thing that he sells is in our vendor eye. He has Smithsonian Student Adventures. They intentionally did not call it student travel, because they're not selling trips. They are selling adventures. They're selling experiences. And that, I think, is something that we can be helping with our students, right? It's not just pop-up dinners, it's escape rooms. For those of you doing breakouts in your classes, it's immersive theater, right? This is not a real jail cell. This is from an escape room that my friend works at in Maui. What do jail cells have to do with human relevance and our students' future readiness? Everything. This is, we've heard other speakers talk about art. This is set design. This is storytelling in its most engaging form. We have to engineer human interactions where it requires interpersonal communication at a very high function and successful level in order to successfully win these games. There was a show in Denver called Sweet and Lucky that fits into what's called immersive theater. Breaks down the fourth wall. There's no seats. You walk in and the play has started and you are in it. And one of the things they wanted to do was make it rain, literally. And so they did a Kickstarter where people donated. You can see that when I took the screenshot, they had $40,000 raised from people in order to create a rainstorm that when you went to the play ended up being that you were indoors, but you were attending a rainy funeral. You're standing indoors with an umbrella and it's raining on you. People are crying, and it's the first 10 minutes of this play. More importantly, for us as storytellers, they created not just advertising they had to sell, but people like me were paying to advertise for them, to tell all my friends, you've got to see this, it's gonna sell out its run, and it did. There's a coffee shop down the street from me that really, for me, drove home the importance not just of storytelling, but of who tells our stories. Because I walked past this A-frame every day with my dog, multiple times a day for weeks. And finally, I went home and asked my wife, I said, I don't get it. Do you understand what that sign is saying? She said, duh. Maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's Maybelline. Oh, yeah, I'm not that target market. I did not get that. That is a story that this, white, middle-aged, cis male could not tell. But you know what? There were a whole lot of story consumers in this room who knew exactly what story this was telling. And so when we limit who our storytellers are, we leave out not just a lot of stories that need to be told, but a lot of stories that need to be heard. And so I want us thinking about space a little bit differently as we leave ACTFL, as we go back to our classrooms. I want us thinking about what are underutilized learning spaces. We have our classrooms, but think about the gym. Think about the cafeteria. Think about the foyer at the front of your building that is used for somewhere between 0 and maybe 100 minutes of instructional time on a daily basis, instead of 8 to 12 hours on a daily basis. Think of our own classrooms and ask yourself, is there a better reason for the front of the room being where it is, other than that's where it's always been? And is that a static notion? Does that change from day to day? Or is the front of the room something that depends on the moment? And the front of the room is where it needs to be for your kids' learning in that day and in that moment. Ask yourself, what direction does our students' learning face? Ask yourself, is it contained not just in my classroom, not just in the foyer, cafeteria, gym, and these underutilized spaces? What about outside two bells and outside of four walls? Why are we limiting our students' learning when it can be 24/7, 365, and anywhere it needs and can happen? And so what I would encourage you to do is you leave this amazing experience at ACTFL and you go back to your schools on Monday morning, is to find an answer, challenge yourself, set a calendar reminder to figure it out and then share it with the rest of us. How are you going to approach storytelling, placemaking, and bringing humanity into your learning for your students starting Monday morning? Thank you very much. Please do give another applause to Yoazama, Carissa Adams, Teachers of the Year. And you know why? And know that we have 3 more amazing speakers coming up this afternoon at 4, right here in this same Bat Cave. Please come and join. They're amazing. We'll learn a ton. Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you for what you do for your learners.